I have always maintained in this channel that as Adventists, if the pillars of our faith will not stand the test of investigation, it is time that we knew it. Paul says in 2 Corinthians 13 and verse 8, "For we can do nothing against the truth, but for the truth." In other words, no true doctrine will lose anything by close investigation. Today, we are talking about why Adventists regard the Sabbath so highly, and why the Sabbath should mean so much to you if you are a Christian. Let's begin. Now, in the Bible, how does God distinguish himself from other gods? Let's find out. Psalms 96 and verse 5 says, "All the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord made the heavens." Okay? Now, Isaiah 40 verse 25 and 26 says, "To whom then will ye liken me? Or shall I be equal, saith the Holy One? Lift up your eyes on high, and behold, who has created all these things?" Isaiah 45 and verse 18 says, "Thus saith the Lord that created the heavens, God himself that formed the earth and made it. I am the Lord, there is none else." As we have seen in these verses, it is the evidence of the creative power of God that distinguishes him from other gods. In other words, the other gods cannot create. Now, in the Bible, what is the reason given for why we should worship God? Let's also find out. Psalms 95 and verse 6 says, "Oh come, let us worship and bow down, let us kneel before our Maker." Okay? Revelation 4 and verse 11 says, "Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things." So, according to the Bible, it is the creative power of God that distinguishes him from other gods. And also, we worship God because he is our creator. Now, have you ever asked yourself what the mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is? Well, let's lay it out today. The mission of the Seventh-day Adventist Church is to make disciples of Jesus Christ who live as his loving witnesses and proclaim to all the people the everlasting gospel of the three angels' message in preparation for his soon return. Now, in the words of Jesus, in the book of Matthew 24 and verse 14, Jesus says, "And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come." Now, in the book of Revelation, the only other place where the word gospel is mentioned is in Revelation 14 that contains the three angels' message. Now, what does it say? Revelation 14 and verse 6 says, "And I saw another angel fly in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to them that dwell on the earth, and to every nation and kindred and tongue and people." Now, if you keep reading to verse 15, it says, "And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him that sat on the cloud, Thrust in thy sickle and reap, for the time is come for thee to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe." Now, in the parable of the wheat and tares of Matthew 13, verse 39 says that the harvest is the end of the world. So then, the everlasting gospel preached by the three angels is the very same gospel that Jesus says will be preached to all nations as a witness, and then the end shall come. Notice what the first angel's message is. Revelation chapter 14 and verse 7 says, "Saying with a loud voice, Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come, and worship him that made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the fountains of waters." We have already established that according to the Bible, it is the creative power of God that distinguishes God from other gods. And also, we worship God because he is our creator. So, when the first angel's message says, "Fear God and give glory to him, for the hour of his judgment is come," and then it says, "And worship him that made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the fountains of waters," is that pointing us to any of the 10 commandments? Absolutely. And what commandment do you think it is pointing us to? The fourth commandment. What does it say? Exodus 20 from verse 8, the Bible says, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days shall thou labor and do all thy work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord thy God. In it thou shalt not do any work, thou, nor thy servant, nor thy daughter, the maid servant, nor thy maid servant, nor thy cattle, nor thy stranger that is within thy gates. Verse 11 says, for in 6 days the Lord made the heaven and earth and sea and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Wherefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it. Have you seen a direct connection with the first angel's message to the Sabbath commandment? The everlasting gospel, which is to be preached to all nations for the end to come, calls men to worship God, and the worship is directly linked to the fourth commandment. The importance of the Sabbath as the memorial of creation is that it keeps ever present the true reason why worship is due to God. And what is the true reason why worship is due to God? Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Then he says, for in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them. In other words, we worship God because he is our creator. We rest on the Sabbath day. Why? Because in 6 days, God made all the world and everything in it. But on the seventh day, he rested. In other words, when you are keeping the seventh day, you are witnessing to all the world that God created everything in 6 days, but on the seventh day, he rested. And that right there is the distinction between God and other gods that start with a small g. In other words, worship on the Sabbath day is what tells us who your God is, and you are also proclaiming to all the world that God made everything in 6 days but rested on the Sabbath day. The Sabbath, therefore, lies at the very foundation of divine worship, for it teaches this great truth in the most impressive manner, and no other institution or commandment does this. The true ground of divine worship, not of that on the seventh day merely, but of worship, is found in the distinction between the Creator and his creatures. This great factor must never be forgotten. It was to keep this truth ever before the minds of men that God instituted the Sabbath in Eden. And so long as the fact that he is our creator continues to be a reason why we should worship God, so long the Sabbath will continue as its sign and memorial. Had the Sabbath been universally kept, man's thoughts and affections would have been led to the Creator as the object of reverence and worship, and there will never have been an idolater, an atheist, or an infidel. That is to mean that if everybody had kept the Sabbath, it will ever keep before us the reason of why we need to worship God and worship God alone, because the evidence of his creative power is what distinguishes him from other gods. And we have seen that the fourth commandment is the only commandment that directly points to God as our creator. In Exodus 31, from verse 12 to 18, God gives Moses the 10 commandments, but sees the need to repeat one commandment. It is the only commandment that points to him as the creator. In other words, if you take away the Sabbath commandment, you will not know who the commandments belong to. In the Lord's Prayer, Jesus teaches us how to pray. In Luke chapter 11 and verse 2, the Bible says, and he said unto them, when ye pray, say, Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Now, have you ever asked yourself what this will of God is? Listen to what the Bible says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 3. For this is the will of God, even your sanctification, that ye should abstain from fornication. Now, Ezekiel chapter 20 and verse 12 is key, because it says, moreover also I gave them my Sabbaths to be a sign between me and them, that they might know that I am the Lord that sanctifies them. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 and verse 3 says, this is the will of God, even your sanctification. And then God has given the Sabbath and says, keep this Sabbath because it's a sign between me and you, that you may know that I am the Lord that sanctifies you. So, the will of God is our sanctification, and God commands us to keep the Sabbath that we may know that he is the one who sanctifies us. And remember, sanctification is a lifetime process. The keeping of the Sabbath is a sign of loyalty to the true God, him that made the heaven and the earth and the sea and the fountains of waters. And this also is what distinguishes him from other gods. So now, do you worship God? Do you keep the Sabbath? As we have noticed, you cannot worship God without keeping the Sabbath. The Sabbath commandment points to God as our creator, and the evidence of his creative power distinguishes him from other gods. That is why the Sabbath means so much to Adventists, and that is why the Sabbath should mean so much to you if you are a Christian. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope to see you in my next episode. Blessings be upon you.